Mike Pompeo reacting on Fox just a short time ago.
This is the kind of behavior we've seen out of Iran for 40 years. The United States has a responsibility to do our part, but the world's got a big role in this too, to keep these sea lanes open. I think the whole world is waking up to the fact that this threat is real. It's not just a threat against America. It's not just a threat against Israel. It's a threat against all of us.
So Lucas Tomlinson tracking this from the Pentagon this morning. Let's begin there. Lucas, good morning.
Good morning, Bill. It's day 4 of an escalating hostage crisis between Iran and Great Britain after Iran seized that British tanker and 23 crew members on board. Over the weekend, Iranian state television released this dramatic video showing men wearing black ski masks fast roping down a helicopter onto the deck of that British oil tanker seized Friday night in the Strait of Hormuz. Earlier this month, a Royal Navy warship blocked 3 Iranian gunboats from doing the same thing to another British tanker. But that same British warship was an hour away this time and could not successfully stop the Iranians from seizing another British tanker. Here's radio traffic from the encounter.
You are ordered to change your course to 360 degrees immediately. If you obey, you will be safe. Over.
You are conducting transit passage in a recognized international strait. Under international law, your passage must not be impaired, impeded, obstructed or hampered. Please confirm that you are not intending to violate international law by unlawfully attempting to board the MV Senator.
Iranian forces ignored the British warship's order and proceeded to take down the tanker. A British defense minister says today the Royal Navy is too small to handle its missions around the world. The British Navy today has roughly half the number of warships it had during the 80s. Making matters worse, British Prime Minister Theresa May will resign Wednesday. Iran says its actions are retaliation for British commandos seizing an Iranian supertanker off Gibraltar 2 weeks ago. Authorities said it was carrying oil to Syria in violation of EU sanctions. The Pentagon announced late Friday night it would send hundreds more troops to Saudi Arabia for the first time in 16 years, including fighter jets like these sent to the region in June. There are currently 70,000 U.S. troops deployed to the Middle East. One day before Iran seized the British oil tanker in the Strait of Hormuz, USS Boxer passed through that same area and destroyed an Iranian drone using this new Marine Corps jamming device strapped to the deck without firing a shot, a new addition to the U.S. arsenal. Iran denies the U.S. took down their drone.
This is all extraordinary stuff. It's not backing down in any sense when you look at all these stories, Lucas. And now you've got Iran saying it seized 17 people that it claims has ties to the U.S. government. What's the story there?
That's right, Bill. It gets worse on Monday. Iran today claims it took 17 Iranian nationals it claims were working for the CIA, spying on Iran's military sites as well as their nuclear sites. Some have been sentenced to death. And this comes as Iran continues to hold at least 5 Americans captive, Bill.
Thank you, Lucas. Lucas Tomlinson watching all that. There will be news today. We'll get back to you at the Pentagon. Thank you, sir. Sandra.
48 hours from now, must-see TV when Robert Mueller testifies before 2 House committees. That happens Wednesday morning. The former special counsel saying he will not speak outside the scope of his Russia report as Democrats and Republicans prepare their strategy for questioning him.
This is a president who has violated the law 6 ways from Sunday. If anyone else had been accused of what the report finds the president had done, they would have been indicted.
Any thought of impeachment is waning, and they know that because the report said that there was no collusion definitively and there was no charged obstruction. Remember what was just interesting you just said there, that the Democrats wanted to focus on obstruction. Remember, the Mueller report is a one-sided report that has not been questioned from the other side. This is our chance to do that.
Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge is live in Washington as we are now 2 days away. Catherine, good morning.
Well, that's right, Sandra, and good morning. Based on our reporting, the Mueller testimony will feel somewhat scripted because House Republicans and Democrats are meeting behind closed doors to finalize their questions and carve out a strategy. The chairman of the House Judiciary Committee you just saw there, Jerry Nadler, they're focusing on obstruction of justice allegations, and they're going to take key sections of this report. They're going to refer to it by page, ask the former special counsel to read it aloud, and then comment on it.
Well, we hope it won't end up being indictment. We're going to ask specific questions about, look at page 344, paragraph 2. Please read it. Does that describe obstruction of justice? And did you find that the president did that, for example?
So we've got 5 hours of testimony Wednesday, and it's being divided up into two sections. As I mentioned, House Judiciary is going to look at allegations of obstruction of justice. And then later that day in the afternoon, House Intelligence is going to look on allegations of coordination between the Russian government and the Trump campaign. It's important to note that the special counsel found that there was no conspiracy between the two parties. The chairman of the House Intelligence Committee says he also wants to bring the report to life. Listen.
Who better to bring them to life than the man who did the investigation himself? We want the people to hear it directly from him, not filtered through Bill Barr, who had his own misleading characterization of it, but from the man who did the work himself.
Special counsel Robert Mueller was very clear in his only public statement on the report in May that he would not go beyond, quote, the four corners of that report. So the challenge for lawmakers on both sides of the aisle will be to get Mueller to answer their questions that go on the scope, outside the scope of the actual report. The key question for Democrats is going to be something called the Office of Legal Counsel Opinion or Memo, or OLC memo. This is the memo that says a sitting president cannot be indicted for criminal charges. And there seems to be some daylight between what's written in the Mueller report and what was stated under oath on Capitol Hill by the Attorney General. The bottom line is that Special Counsel Robert Mueller, if he says he felt like he was handcuffed throughout the investigation and could not bring charges against a sitting president, that puts more wind in the sails for Democrats. But if he says it was an evidence problem, which is what the Attorney General has maintained, that really, in effect, puts a stake in the heart of the whole Russia collusion case. Sandra.
Sets up for a very interesting week. Catherine, thank you.
Certainly does. Want to bring in Byron York for some analysis. Byron, nice to see you. Here's the headline from your piece today. Democrats think they've got a slam dunk obstruction case against Trump. They don't. End quote. Explain that, Byron.
Well, obstruction is really the whole ball game here. If you remember, before the Mueller report was released, a number of Democrats hoped that Mueller would prove that there had been a conspiracy or coordination between the Trump campaign and Russia to fix the 2016 election. Instead, Mueller said the evidence, he concluded the evidence, did not establish that that actually happened. So a lot of Democrats made a very quick pivot to obstruction, where Mueller did not draw any conclusion, but he gave a lot of evidence that Democrats like to portray as obstruction. So what you are going to see at Mueller's time before the House Judiciary Committee, which will be the longer of his two appearances, is Democrats trying to show that the president did in fact obstruct justice. What I did in this piece is went through a lot of their evidence, just showing that it's more tenuous, it is more subject to interpretation, and more difficult to prove than they may think.
And Mueller did not draw a conclusion on either. If they ask him to turn to page 221 and read it aloud, you wonder if he will, or whether or not his lawyer steps in. Quickly, the president's tweeting on this. We're going to share that with our viewers in a little bit. But first, oh, here it is. Okay. Highly conflicted Bob Mueller should not be given another bite at the apple. In the end, it'll be bad for him and the phony Democrats in Congress who have done nothing but waste time on this ridiculous witch hunt. Result of the Mueller report: no collusion, no obstruction. While I have you, Byron, the president also is tweeting on the squad. Here's that now. I don't believe the 4 congresswomen are capable of loving our country, he writes. They should apologize to America and Israel for the horrible, hateful things they have said. They are destroying the Democrat Party, but are weak and insecure people who can never destroy our great nation. Then Liz Cheney is on CBS, and you get a pretty heated back and forth with Margaret Brennan, the host. It went like this.
I think the news media really wants to make this about race. You just did it. I would really like to see the media as focused. I would like to see the media as focused on the substance of what this wing of the Democratic Party is advocating, because that is really dangerous for our country. And I know you guys don't want to. You don't want to focus on the fact that there are substantive differences. You also don't want to focus on the. But I let you ask me the question. This is about
but that's
policy,
what the president
and it
is talking about. He's
that
not
is not
about
true.
policy.
The president every single day talks about policy.
There it is, then. It's policy and substance. That's the case she is making. You saw that piece. What you think, Byron?
Well, we have seen one solid week of bad coverage and publicity for the Trump White House over this thing, and it had to end with the Sunday shows, but I think it's pretty clear the White House would like to move on. They have several days ago moved on from the president's original tweet telling members of the squad they should go back to where they came from, moved on to actually criticizing things that members of the squad have said about the United States or Israel or other topics. So they're trying to change the subject into what these members of Congress have actually said. They're probably happier, oddly enough, that we're now entering Mueller week and maybe ending the tweet week.
Well, that could be among the leadership anyway. Stephen Miller with Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday talked about it too.
These four congresswomen detest America as it exists, as it is currently constructed. They want it to be a socialist, open borders country. If you, as Donald Trump says, want to destroy America with open borders, you cannot say you love your country. If you attack border agents the way that Ocasio-Cortez has, it means you have a deep-seated hatred of the nation as it exists.
Oh, that interview too, Byron, quickly on that.
Well, look, the part about loving the country, obviously Democrats are going to completely reject. But if Republicans, if the White House want to say Democrats are for open borders or they're for socialism, those are two of the main themes of this campaign as it is emerging. So we will see more of that.
Stephen Miller also said the people that they were referring to in North Carolina, remember Fayetteville? He said these people are tired of being beaten up, looked down upon, talked down to by members of Congress on the left in Washington, D.C. A lot of people in mid-America probably would agree with that point. Byron, it's great to see you on a Monday from Washington. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Bill.
All right, we'll get to more of these tweets coming up in a moment, too. Mueller's going to be hot and heavy. Or maybe not.
Mueller, the president trying to cut this budget deal. We'll talk to Art Laffer coming up on that. It's going to be a big week.
Okay.
All right, now to this. Calls growing louder demanding the resignation of Puerto Rico's governor. Today, 1 million people could take to the streets calling for him to step down after leaked text messages with his closest aides and allies. We'll take you there live.
Also, Sandra, an alarming message from the Pentagon claiming a U.S. aircraft was, quote, aggressively shadowed by a fighter jet from Venezuela. General Jack Keane on that, plus the breaking news on Iran coming up in a moment here with the General. Stand by.
And a tragic end to a trip for an American woman and her boyfriend, who were found dead alongside a highway in Canada. What police there are saying now about that investigation.
You don't know if you have seen this now. Here it is on screen from the president. It says the report of Iran capturing CIA spies is totally false, zero truth. Just more lies and propaganda like their shot-down drone put out by a religious regime that is badly failing and has no idea what to do. Their economy is dead and will get much worse. Iran is a total mess, end quote. General, this is ramping up by the day. Where's it going?
Well, first of all, I mean, our strategic offensive campaign to politically, diplomatically, and economically isolate Iran is absolutely succeeding. The president's words there are right on the money. Secondly, we're also conducting a defensive campaign, Bill, and that is why we're bringing the troops into the region to deter Iran from taking actions against our bases and our troops that are in there by the tens of thousands. And number two, we're attempting to stitch together with our allies tanker protection and surveillance in the Persian Gulf and the Straits of Hormuz, so the Iranians' ability to interfere with that tanker traffic will be eliminated. That hasn't been completed yet. It's a work in progress.
Okay, so in the meantime, the foreign minister was in New York last week, and now he's popped up in Venezuela. So you've got these parallel stories between the Iranian government and Maduro's regime. Here's the tweet from John Bolton. He says, something tells me Zarif felt right at home in Caracas as the guest of Maduro's illegitimate regime. Zarif responds, make no mistake, having failed to lure Donald Trump into the war of the century and fearing collapse of his B team, John Bolton is turning his venom against the UK in hopes of dragging it into a quagmire. Only prudence and foresight can thwart such ploys. Will you marry that now to this report of a Venezuelan jet trailing one of our fighter jets off the coast? And what do you come up with, General?
Well, first of all, I mean, Zarif and the Iranian regime, they are acting desperately. It's impacting their judgment. This taking of a British tanker is in retaliation for the Brits taking theirs. And the Gibraltar court ruled just over the weekend that they were going to hold on to it for another 30 days. They had failed to take a British tanker last week, and also they had one of their drones shot down. And one of the reasons for taking this tanker is obviously retaliation, but they also want to demonstrate to their own people that they've got resolve here, they've got strength, and they don't want to appear weak. And they're doing that to our allies in the region, marrying up with
Maduro. Do you think these acts play well at home then within Iran?
Oh, this particular one, they've done that for their people. They want, remember, this is a repressive regime like North Korea, like the Chinese communists in China. And they always demonstrate to their people the power of the regime, because the psychological pressure that they want on their people is part of their ploy here. And Iran, because of their missteps, has been looking weak. So that is a part of the reason for seizing a British tanker as well.
Okay, back to the Venezuela story I mentioned here. Marco Rubio sounded off on Sunday. He said the following, said Venezuela only has 3 fighter jets that can fly. If they ever harmed any U.S. aircraft, they would soon have 0, end tweet, after being aggressively shadowed, General, by this fighter jet from Venezuela.
Yeah, I mean, these things don't have much military significance to them, to be frank about it. Clearly, we're dependent on the skill of those pilots that are, exceeding the bounds of international norms here. But why are they doing this? They are also doing this to demonstrate to the allies in the region and also to their own people that they can stand up to the United States. That's why the Russians do it on occasion all around the world with our ships, with our airplanes too. I mean, the Russians aren't intending to get into some kind of fight with us over this. They want to demonstrate also to their own people and to our allies that they can stand up to us. So this is more about propaganda and public relations than it is about military significance.
Well, General, good to see you on a Monday. Thanks for going through all of that. Jack Keane, more to come on this. No, I'm certain that you are well aware of that. Thank you, General, for your time.
Good talking to you, Bill.
You too.
Fox News alert now. 1 million protesters could take to the streets today in Puerto Rico. Those protesters demanding the governor's resignation. Details on the emails that have sparked outrage and how the governor is now responding. Plus, a scorcher in the Northeast, now those near triple-digit temperatures leading to a huge headache in New York and beyond. We'll explain.
It's terrible. The heat is terrible. My grandson has asthma, and my doggy is inside, suffocating. I can't even take him outside. I don't know. We all stress here.
Man, 53,000 without power last night. As of this morning, Con Ed says that number is down to under 20,000. Last week, we were dealing with that major blackout. So folks are getting through it all across the East Coast, aren't they? I tell you something, my apartment, when I came home on Sunday, was so smoking, stinking hot. I mean, you could have done hot yoga in there. Had a whole class.
It's been brutal.
Steam on the street.
It's been brutal. It's supposed to get better the next couple of days.
Right, starting today.
And then the heat returns again.
How'd you survive? Do okay with the kids, everything?
You find a pool, you dip in, body of water, just something.
And you stay there. Good advice. Yeah.
All right, Fox News alert now. 1 million protesters could march in Puerto Rico today, calling for the resignation of their governor amid allegations of corruption after leaked messages where he mocked women and victims of Hurricane Maria. He says he will not step down, but will not seek re-election. Brian Yanis is live in San Juan with the latest on all this. Hey, Brian, good morning.
Sandra, good morning. Behind me, you can see this is what demonstrators say could be the largest demonstration in Puerto Rico's history. About 1 million people expected here today. Right now, they are marching, making their way on to one of the major intersections and major expressways here in Puerto Rico, Expressway de las Americas. They are upset. Ricardo Rosselló, the governor, yesterday went on Facebook Live and said that he's not resigning. Instead, he says he's not seeking re-election in 2020, and he said he's resigning as president of his party. He also said he welcomes any kind of impeachment process that may be happening or investigation happening in the legislature.
I must be respectful of the constitutional order, and I welcome the process started by the Legislative Assembly, which I will face with all truth, strength, and in a responsible manner.
But you know what? That message did not sit well. We spoke to protesters who arrived at this demonstration at 4 a.m. and they said yesterday's Facebook Live was a provocation. It was an insult. Take a listen.
This is not just about a political party, and that's why I am here today. I wasn't going to come, but when I heard that message, I said, no, Janice Soto Rivera is coming with her family.
It was like an insult. We knew that. It was an insult of our intelligence. You know, we didn't need to hear that. We need to hear, I am out. That's it.
This all really started last Saturday when 889 pages of text messages came out showing Rosselló speaking to some 12 aides in which he was not only insulting Hurricane Maria victims together in that group chat, but they were making misogynistic and homophobic comments. You add that with the fact that 2 weeks ago, two of Rosselló's main deputies, the Secretary of Education and the head of the health insurance program here, were arrested by the FBI for steering millions of dollars into improper private hands. All of that has equated to pressure from the mainland. Presidential candidates are now speaking out, anywhere from Joe Biden, who is calling the comments here shameful by Rosselló, and others like Tulsi Gabbard, who is the only one who's shown up here on the island with the protesters. And if I take you back here on stage, you can see that the protesters are really making their way. They are extremely upset. And I'll tell you what, Sandra, it's not just here. They're asking him to resign here. They're also asking him to resign in California, in Texas, in Florida. Puerto Ricans all over the mainland joining their brothers and sisters here on the island, Americans on the U.S. territory, demanding that Ricky step down. Sandra.
What a scene they're developing in San Juan. We'll check back with you, Brian Yanis. Thank you.
Certainly is. 9:28 now. Moments from now, Washington honors the late Justice John Paul Stevens. His casket arriving in the Great Hall of the Supreme Court. We'll take you there live as the public gathers to pay their respects to a big, big life.
Plus, a new report suggesting President Trump plans on aggressive spending cuts in his second term if he wins one. How will that affect his re-election campaign? Former Reagan economics advisor Art Lapper is on deck. He'll take that one up.
Looking forward to seeing him and brand new additions. Baseball Hall of Fame. Here we go. How one player is just arriving in the Great Hall of the Supreme Court. There we are. A private ceremony held to honor the nation's third longest serving Supreme Court justice in American history. He then lies in repose as the public gathers for respects there. Gary Tenney's watching as well from the Supreme Court. Gary, what a moment this is.
Yeah, Bill, it really is special, and it's something significant that I want to point out. You can see the long line of folks standing on both sides of the steps as the casket makes its way up to the Great Hall, and those are the former law clerks of the late Justice Stevens. He served on the court for roughly 35 years, and over that time, roughly 4 law clerks a year. It's about 140 folks. So you can see his service to the nation as he was here, as his casket's being carried up there. Honorary pallbearers, as well as lining the court's wall. A private ceremony is just going to be getting underway shortly. The late Justice's family, his former law clerks, as well as current and former Supreme Court justices are all expected to attend. Justice Stevens will lie in repose for the rest of the day in the Great Hall as the public pays its respects. And the last time we saw that honor bestowed was just a few years ago after the passing of Justice Antonin Scalia, a conservative lion on the court who was often at odds with Stevens was nominated to the High Court in 1975 by Republican President Gerald Ford, and Stevens was politically conservative at the time. And even though later he became known as a leader of the court's liberal wing, he always maintained that his principles never changed and that it was the country that became more conservative. He will certainly be remembered for his love of this country, though. After graduating college, Stevens joined the Navy just one day before the attack on Pearl Harbor. He earned a Bronze Star for his work as part of the famous codebreakers stationed in Hawaii. And tomorrow, a private funeral service will be held at Arlington National Cemetery, where he will be buried next to his wife in Section 5, which is just below the grave of President John F. Kennedy and its eternal flame. A very fitting spot for an icon of the Supreme Court, Bill.
Yeah, clearly. Thank you, Garrett. Garrett Tenney, we want to share that moment with our viewers, and we will observe from afar as that continues today. Thank you, Garrett Tenney at the Supreme Court in Washington.
New reports the president might look to make spending cuts if he is reelected. The Washington Post reporting President Trump has instructed White House aides to look for ways to slash the federal budget if he wins a second term. Let's bring in Art Laffer, former Reagan economics advisor. Art, always good to see you, and good morning to you. So how does
Good morning, Sandra.
How does that play in 2020 if that's the case?
I think that's the right thing for him to do. I mean, government spending is taxation, Sandra, and it's out of control, and we've got to bring it back under control. And with this contentious Congress and a political environment, there was no way the president could bring spending under control in this term, in his first term. But in his second term, I expect that he'll be able to really make huge headway on that.
Fair to say that would mark a big reversal from what we've seen so far?
It is a big reversal, and it should be done long ago. I mean, you know, especially entitlements and some of the other programs are way out of control. And a lot of other things are there, too. I mean, when you look at the tax program, when you look at some of the other revenue sources, I mean, it's amazing how much revenue we could raise if we wanted to. I mean, just selling off Camp Pendleton would probably be $300 billion or something like that. And why do we have all that gold sitting in Fort Knox when it could be sold and used to reduce the debt? I mean, there's lots of others. We could have a federal tax amnesty program, all of that. But most importantly, of course, is what the president says. We've got to reduce government spending, which is total taxation. We've got to stop paying people not to work and stop taxing them if they do work. And, you know, we've got to keep this prosperity going. Nothing works if we don't keep this prosperity going.
So we'll wait and see what the president himself has to say on this. For now, we're going off this Washington Post report. Here's the headline this morning. Trump aims to cut spending after 2020. And in that Washington Post piece, beyond that reporting, it says muddying matters. The president has not instructed aides as to how sweeping he wants those federal budget cuts to be in his second term. Would he, Art, do you believe, would he be open to significant cuts to Medicare? Would he touch that?
I don't know what specifically programs. I mean, I've not talked to the president about this at all. But the one thing the president does is he does try to handle problems completely and totally. He's not soft or squishy about that stuff. And when you look at total spending, you should look at every item on the spending list, whether it be Medicare, whether it be food stamps, whether it be military, whether it be any of these programs. They should all be looked at very, very carefully to bring down spending, and bring down spending by a lot. If you can't bring down spending during a boom, you sure as heck can't do it during a bust, because frankly, if people are unemployed, unemployment benefits, food stamps programs, all of these school lunch programs are necessities. They're not luxuries. The only time you can really make headway on cutting spending is when the economy is doing very, very well. And that's what I think he should do in his next term. And by the way, I don't think that's an if. I think in his second term. Just joking, Sandra.
Got it. We'll
but I think
see,
this is the right time to get spending, and right after he wins the election. It shouldn't be a political football. It just shouldn't be. After the election is the perfect time to do it.
Well, it certainly will be. Another debt ceiling showdown is on the horizon, Art. I wonder how this is all going to play out. Doug Collins taking Nancy Pelosi on in this, what is shaping up to be already a pretty fierce battle over the weekend on the Sunday shows. Here's Doug Collins.
The debt ceiling is something she's going to have to deal with on her progressive caucus and others, and also the budget caps deal. The question is, do they want to destroy our military as they had done previously, or do they want to actually build it up? We've got money in there, but they've got to find a budget caps deal so we don't shut down the government come September.
Bipartisan Policy Center says that the U.S. government could hit the debt ceiling in September. The president's making the case for it. What did you think of what you just heard from Doug Collins over the weekend on Nancy Pelosi?
Well, I think Doug Collins is right. I think he's politically at the wrong time. I think we should do this after the election. The debt ceiling should not be the whole election issue, frankly. I think President Trump is completely correct on this to wait till after the election. But Doug Collins is totally correct on what we need to do. Caps, we need to get entitlements. We need to go after all of these programs.
All right. Art Laffer, always good to talk to you. Hope to get you back on soon. We'll see where it all goes. Thank you, sir.
Well, say hello to Bill.
Hey.
He heard you.
Hey, Art, come on back. All right, a fresh crop of Hall of Famers. Cooperstown, New York over the weekend. Edgar Martinez, Mike Mussina, Harold Baines, Lee Smith, Mariano Rivera, and the late Roy Halladay entering baseball's Hall of Fame. Cool moment. Also, the former Yankee closer, Rivera, made history as the first player ever selected in a unanimous vote. That's cool. Something to hang your hat on.
Very interesting indeed.
I tell you, Cooperstown, have you been?
I have not been.
Cooperstown in July is about as American as you can find across this. It is so red, white, blue, and green grass everywhere. To moms and dads across the country, if you haven't done it yet, do it when your kids are still at a young age where they'd appreciate it. It's a really, really great spot.
Yeah.
Yes, check it out.
All right, on to this new fundraising numbers from the RNC and the DNC showing a clear winner for the month of June. What it means for 2020. Mark Thiessen will be joining us. He's prosecuting high-profile cases, putting criminals from mobsters and drug dealers, killers to crooked politicians behind bars. His office handled around 100,000 criminal cases every year until he stepped down in 2009 at the age of 89. Morgenthau even inspired a character on the long-running show Law and Order. Morgenthau died Sunday after a short illness. He was 99 years old.
Now the money, Republicans with a leg up over Democrats when it comes to fundraising. The RNC raised about $20 million last month. That more than doubled the $8.5 million the DNC received. Mark Thiessen, Washington Post, Fox News contributor, co-host of What the Hell is Going On? That's a podcast. You came up with that, didn't you, huh?
I did, absolutely.
You steal that, okay? I see. All right, here we go. RNC, DNC, RNC cash on hand, $43.5 million. DNC has $9.3 million. Then you look at the burn rate. Advance at one time, guys. DNC June fundraising raised 8.5, spent 7.5. What do you make of it, Mark?
Well, I make of it that Republican enthusiasm is extremely high because the Democratic Party, by embracing socialism, is turning this election into an existential threat. I mean, you've got the Medicare for all, Green New Deal, open borders, free college, free health care, free everything. They want to turn this country into Venezuela. And so, you know, that would change fundamentally. This election could fundamentally change what it means to be American, what this country is all about. So I think that it's not surprising that people who are in favor of free enterprise and individual liberty and opposed to socialism are enthusiastic, and they're given to the party to reelect the president who says he's going to stop that.
It does tell us a bit of a storyline. It's something really interesting to watch. I think the Trump campaign said a year ago they need to raise $1 billion for 2020. That's just extraordinary. Two other stories here I think are very interesting, right? CBS poll came out. It looks like even though you've got 48 people on stage, Mark, you're starting to winnow the field, okay? Poll shows Biden 25, Warren 20, Harris 16, and Sanders at 16%. You make of that what?
So it is tightening after the last debate, which was to be expected. Biden is still leading because he's perceived as being the most electable candidate. I think that's actually a myth that Joe Biden is the most electable candidate because, look, his pitch is, I can win back those voters who voted for me and Barack Obama twice in 2008 and 2012. And he's the last guy to be able to do that because if you think about it, those people left Obama Biden for a reason, because they didn't get hope and change. Under Obama Biden, they lost 200,000 manufacturing jobs, and Obama told them those jobs aren't coming back. And guess what? Under Trump, in just 2 years, 500,000 are back. So Biden is not really the most electable candidate, but he's got an enthusiasm gap in that poll, which is really interesting with the other candidates, because he's not running on the platform of democratic socialism that is really animating the Democratic Party right now.
What's that enthusiasm gap? How do you gauge that?
Well, I mean, his numbers in terms of how many people are excited about him versus other like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, who are running as the Democratic Socialist candidates for the party, is their enthusiasm for the candidacy is much higher. But he's winning the nomination right now because he's perceived as being more electable. But he's running for Obama's third term, and that's considered too right-wing in today's Democratic Party. They don't want Obamacare. They want Medicare for all. They don't want some green energy investments. They want a Green New Deal. So Biden is behind the curve of what Democrats want. They're going for him because they think that he's the guy who can beat Trump, and he really isn't.
Okay, now there's another topic. Did you see this story in the Daily Beast earlier today? I'll just share the headline here. Top Dem think tank warns party. You're losing immigration messaging war to Trump. I don't know what you took from that piece, Mark. But what I took is that, it's rule of law on one side versus open borders on the other, and that's the way it's being framed. The author makes the point that that's how it's also being received and interpreted across America. Go.
Yeah, because Americans can see with their plain eyes that the Democratic Party is becoming the party of illegal immigration. Look, in 2009, Chuck Schumer gave a speech in which he said illegal immigration is wrong, plain and simple. A Democrat could not get away with saying those words today. If you look at that last debate, when they asked, are you for decriminalizing illegal border crossings, almost every hand went up. When you at that last debate, are you for giving free health care to illegal immigrants, almost every hand came up. So open borders and socialism are a path to national suicide, but they're also a path to political suicide for the Democratic Party.
All right. More to come on that. The themes continue. Thank you, Mark. It's nice to see you. Have a great Monday.
Thanks, Phil.
Okay? Mark Thiessen,
all right, you too.
In Washington. Appreciate your time. Sandra.
Well, first it was the Dominican Republic, and now there are concerns for anyone planning to visit another tropical destination. At least 19 people dead after drinking tainted alcohol.
Also, a young couple traveling in Canada found dead by the side of the road. How did that happen? Were they targeted? A live report on that next.
We were there to help them, like almost like an angel there to help them in a way, like trying to be good and help them, but yet that same day the complete opposite of humanity hurt them. Like
from 32 to 72 have died over the past 2 months. Liquor sellers sometimes dilute the products with methanol to increase the profit margin or raise alcohol content. The government seizing some 30,000 bottles from brands suspected of being tainted in that country.
Fox News alert now. A 24-year-old American woman and her Australian boyfriend found dead along a Canadian highway. Authorities suspect a double homicide. Now investigators are searching for clues. Jonathan Seri is live in Atlanta with that story. Jonathan?
And Sandra, one of the victims, Lucas Fowler, is the son of an Australian police inspector. In fact, the New South Wales Police Force in Australia sent 2 detectives to Canada to serve as liaisons. Australian authorities say it appears Fowler and his American girlfriend, China Deese of North Carolina, were fatally shot while traveling in a remote part of the Canadian province of British Columbia. The young woman's mother and brother say they want answers.
I want this to be personal. This was someone's son, someone's daughter.
This isn't enough. This is not enough. And there's a huge safety concern for people traveling in Canada in or around that area this summer and right now, and it's concerning.
Canadian authorities say homicides in this remote part of northern British Columbia are highly unusual, and they're downplaying rumors that the couple may have fallen victim to a serial killer.
At this point, we have nothing to indicate that their deaths are linked to any other active and ongoing investigations in that area of the province, or that there's a heightened risk to public safety because of this.
A week ago today, officers with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police found the young victim's body on Alaska Highway about 20 kilometers or 12 miles south of Liard Hot Springs. There was a blue minivan with Alberta license plates at the scene, so RCMP investigators would like to speak with anyone who may have seen the van, rendered assistance, or traveled that stretch of highway early last week. And officers are especially interested in talking with anyone who may have obtained dash cam video of that area at that time. Sandra?
So a lot of unanswered questions there. Jonathan Seri, thank you. Later in the show, by the way, we'll be speaking to China Deese's mother and brother. That'll be happening in our 11 a.m. hour, so please tune in.